Support for Podcast by Night is provided by Midnight Syndicate. To learn more, please visit midnightsyndicate.com. Welcome back to Podcast by Night. My name's John.
I'm Jen.
And we're going to continue our conversation about the Ventrue that we started last episode. And these guys are fascinating as all hell, so I hope you stick around for it.
I find them fascinating. It gets into my deep, deep, deep love of Roman history. I have to love it deeply right now. I'm too committed at this point.
Where we left off last time, we were discussing about how the Ventrue are still, to this day, one of the most influential clans of the Camarilla. Or Camarilla, for everybody out there.
Yeah, I know the debate is deep. Camarilla or Camarilla. You know, I being that we live in California, I like to respect the fact that it's the double L Spanish, Y sound.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So yes, as we said, they've spent the better part of the last 2 millennia building up an influence network. We kind of reviewed that the last time around, this concept of the familia and how the familia would go about creating networks of influence and patrons and clients. And, vampires being what they are, those vampires often are still around, and those networks all still exist, and they've all been built up over all these centuries. And consequently, the Ventrue are, they're experts at the game of influence in the masquerade in a way that few of the other clans are. The Ventrue are just the kings of moving in shadows in terms of controlling humans and the different areas of influence that humans have access to.
Right. As we've said last time, they definitely found their ways to control whatever the power structure was of the time. And obviously in the modern knights, it's corporations, it's unions, it's politicians, and they've definitely had, like we said, 2 millennia to build up the groundwork for this network building like few other clans have.
Yeah, and the Ventrue are probably second only to the Tremere in terms of how their clan structure is built, because their clan structure is built to reflect this influence network they built for themselves. And they've had to do that because that influence network is huge, and they need to be able to control it effectively and in a way that is both malleable depending on the situations they're in, but also can be salvageable should someone mysteriously go missing or die. You don't want to lose that influence. So Clan Ventrue is a highly structured, very regimented clan. And again, it goes back to that Roman concept of the familia, but also to this idea called the cursus honorium, which basically is like honorable course. It was a Roman concept of the elite classes had a particular career ladder, shall we say, that they had to climb in order to gain status in society. And if you're a male of a noble or up-and-coming family, you followed the different rungs of the career ladder to gain power in Rome. And each rung was a different kind of office you could have. And it was a toss-up between military and public, because in Roman life, they went together. And so that cursus honorum is what is the basis for Clan Ventrue structure to this very night. It's that idea of everybody comes into the clan, you all come in at a certain level, and you have to work your way up the ladder, and you have to hold these certain positions if you're going to have a particular path within the clan.
Yes, it's a very time-tested and time-honored way of sort of progressing one's influence, be it your sire or the clan at large, by essentially like, olden times where you have two sons and one goes and carries on the family name, etc., and the other one goes and joins the church, because at the time those were the two seats of power, religion and your namesake, especially if you were a noble. This is definitely a continuation of the idea that, like you said, public service or military service. Just look at our recent history, not even recent, the entire history of our nation based on who we follow, our presidents. We used to love this idea that if we had a president and he had military service, and if he was also the governor of something, so therefore he had both. And we held that in high esteem, and to some degree we still do. So they were highly aware of this, and they know it looks good, and both on paper and in public. So they're definitely continuing that idea.
Yeah, Julius Caesar, for anyone who's a history wonk like myself out there, he's the prime example, I would think, for anyone who wants to play Ventrue to see how is this game played, because he was a noble from an up-and-coming family who had enough money, he could throw into public works, because that's what you did when you're a public figure. And yet he also knew that political power lay in his military pedigree. So he went and got a military position. And so he kind of climbs all these various rungs of education, public life, being in the military, and giving out largesse to the public, in terms of food and coin. And he does all these things in order to kind of make his way up the ranks of the Roman hierarchy. And if you want to play Ventrue, I highly recommend at least just going and reading the Wikipedia article and seeing kind of how he did it, because that really is kind of the heart and soul of how the Ventrue perceive themselves in terms of, how do you gain power and how do you gain status and influence. It's this very old model, but it's a very good one. It stood the test of time.
Also, because they've had all this time to really work with that model of control and influence, leave it to the Ventrue to really distill it down. The heart of this whole system is the concept of what they call dignitas, and it is something that is really hard to define, but it essentially is a mixture of charisma and prestige, which goes back to the very heart of what Jen was just saying about Julius Caesar, is that he had both.
Yes. So dignitas, like you said, John, it's a mixture of both charisma and, that ability to have a certain grace in the public eye to influence people, and prestige. But it also has an aspect of honor or saving face in there. Very Middle Eastern or almost Far Eastern. Dignitas is not just the ability to sway people or to be respectable, but it's also that you have a certain sense of honor as you do it. So everything you do in your public life is to add to your dignitas. And the more dignitas you have, the more sway you have. You can, if you have a great deal of dignitas, you can get others to work for you. You can get others to want to be on your side. You can sway the public. Your dignitas is kind of your word of bond. If you're trying to make a negotiation and you are wanting to have a little bit of edge and a little bit of sway in this, if you have greater dignitas than the other person, then chances are pretty high you're going to win that negotiation. And your dignitas can be damaged. You don't want that dignitas damaged. It's sort of your political and social collateral. It is everything that represents you in a public sphere. And for the Ventrue, this is the chips that they play with at the political game. This is everything for them. So at the heart and soul of what it means to be a Ventrue, it's your dignitas.
Right. Dignitas is maybe not a word that the entire court of the Camarilla would know, unless, they're particularly knowledgeable of the Ventrue. But like Jen said, it encompasses all of that. So even if you are just trying to sway the Gangrel and the Nosferatu to see your viewpoint, you are tapping into that dignitas, whether they know the term or not. But the thing is that the other Ventrue do know that. And so not only are you helping the clan out by getting that Nosferatu to give you some info, but it also, the superiors watching you are taking note. It's like Jen said, it's your political and social collateral. It is your credit that somebody's keeping track of, and you can really use it to your advantage the more you have.
Yeah. And things like your reputation in court, your moral standing, your ethical worth, the grace and poise that you show in public, all of that feeds into your dignitas, especially for Ventrue, who see themselves as the natural leaders of the Camarilla. Everything about you is going to be about dignity and poise. And so you don't want to be uncultured. You don't want to lose your temper. You don't want to be angry, at least visibly. You don't want to seem as if you are, too callous or too kind, or there's all these things you have to keep in mind in terms of your dignitas. Before we start recording, John and I were talking about, 19th century British nobles and the education they went through. So that's another good example of looking at them and what it meant to be considered a gentleman in British society. It's that same concept of you must appear to be above it all. You cannot lose your cool. You must appear to be compassionate without being too overtly friendly. If you ever watch Downton Abbey or Upstairs, Downstairs, those all, when they're preaching about what it means to be a gentleman, these are some of the things that they're preaching about. Not that they practiced it, but this is the concept of what's behind dignitas.
The clan themselves understand, with their Roman roots and everything, they understood that dignitas was a huge deal in terms of status, and especially status within the clan. And so, in doing so, they devised a system of ranks within the clan that just by saying that you have X title, instantly people of the clan, other Ventrue, knew or know where your standing is, how big of a deal you are.
Yeah, how much dignitas do you have?
So I'm going to let Jen handle all the pronunciations when it comes to Latin.
Oh, you would. So, as we've already mentioned, dignitas is really the only way to have any political leverage in Clan Ventrue. But it's not granted just because you're cool. There is a level of expectation and responsibility that's inherent with having dignitas. So if you're cool enough to earn it, then you're expected to continue to do good things for the clan and benefit others around you as befits someone who's in that kind of client-patron relationship you're in.
Right, that goes back to dealing with the plebeians, the other lower clans. It is, what am I trying to say? It is elitism, but it's power with responsibility. It's the idea that just because I'm ruling over you, you got to trust me. I know what I'm doing because I will take care of you.
Yeah, it's noblesse oblige.
That's it. Noblesse oblige. Yes.
You are in an exalted state, but I am obligated by my exalted state to have this relationship with you.
Yes.
And provide you with certain things. Yes. So the higher you rise in Clan Ventrue, of course, the more potential dignitas you're able to gain. And so because dignitas is sort of the be-all, end-all of socio-political cred in Clan Ventrue, younger Ventrue want to get more dignitas and are looking for ways to gain more of it. And it's sort of like status in the Camarilla. It's like when you are young and you're the neonate, you ain't got no street cred, but you're looking for ways to get more street cred. So the more you take on and the more you do for the clan and the more you succeed at it, that's the key part, you have to succeed, the more dignitas you gain.
Right, and remember what Jen said about the client-patron relationship as a role-playing note. This is something that I want everybody interested in Ventrue to keep in mind is if you're new and you're younger and there are older Ventrue in the game, or at least ones with more dignitas, that's a key way to get involved with the story and gain dignitas for yourself. because if you look good, they look good, and they want you to look good.
Yeah, they want you to look good because it means they look good.
Right.
That gains you both dignitas. It's brilliant how that works.
Absolutely. Isn't that neat?
Yeah, unfortunately, though, if you make a problem or a mistake, that means it's less dignitas for you and probably less for them. So you don't want that. Failure is almost worse than death for a Ventrue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because of that, it's not just about making your own mistakes. It's your failures also reflect on who your patron is. So if you screw up, then it looks bad on them. And it will tarnish any legacy that you've built up. And probably their legacy too. And without your legacy of good deeds, of things that you have done to ennoble the clan, then you're pretty much nothing in Clan Ventrue.
Yeah, and heaven forbid that your patron is also your sire.
Ooh, yeah, that's bad.
That's real bad.
So basically, failure's not an option. Because if you fail, then you damage your legacy. If you don't have a legacy, then you're nothing in Clan Ventrue. And you're disposable. So there you go. Failure just is not an option for the Ventrue.
Right, and also as a player, I'm pretty sure that it goes without saying that if somebody is out to get you, you're going to keep an eye on them. But remember, you do want to keep your enemies closer, because if they get wind of how precious this Dignitas is and your schemes and how fragile they really are, that could be a real problem for you. So just keep that in mind. It's like, oh, they're not just after me. They're after me, my patron, and my clan.
Yeah. And your sire, and the whole 9 yards.
And the whole 9 yards. That's right.
Yep. So at the end of the night, it's all about the Dignitas. The Ventrue that's really what they're after. Sure, the Camry is great, and serving vampiric kind, that's all well and good. But it's the standing you have and the legacy you create that is really meaningful for a Ventrue. So because of this, Ventrue take assaults and affronts on their Dignitas very seriously. Wars have been fought over their Dignitas. If you've affronted the dignity of a Ventrue, they have fought wars. They have been known to demand the right to kill those who've insulted them. If you want to make an enemy for the rest of your life, then insult a Ventrue's reputation and legacy. And therein lies the conflict between the Ventrue and the Brujah.
Oh, absolutely. Remember Carthage, because they do.
Remember Carthage. Yes.
So, of course, with a group like the Ventrue, with Dignitas being so important, and the Familia and the client patron system, they created their own system on how to handle the in-clan affairs and ordering of these influences. And this is where the Latin names come in. So, Jen, I'm going to let you.
Well, I will say in my defense, a lot of these are actually Greek names. Yeah,
I know words. I'm smart.
It's a little bit of a mixture between Greek and Latin. And so some of them have their roots in ancient Athens, of all places. And that's in part because the Romans idealized the Athenians. Do not tell the Brujah that, because they will laugh so hard. The Ventrue, like we said, have a very structured clan order. They're not as bad as the Tremere. And when we get into the Tremere, oh boy, we have to have a whole episode just on their clan structure. But for the Ventrue, they do have, like I said, there is this Cursus Honorium. And so there's different rungs of the ladder of Clan Ventrue and how they are set up, and different roles you can hold within the clan in order to keep everything in order and all these influences running. And if you want to be in the Cool Kids Club, you have to gain more Dignitas to get these different levels within the clan. So the first of the titles within Clan Ventrue was in ancient times known as the Ephorate. And in modern nights, they call it much more the Directorate. But, Ephorate, if you hear in game Ephorate or Directorate, they're really the same thing. And these are the leaders of Clan Ventrue. And consists of the 12 of the most powerful Ventrue. And they manage all clan affairs across the globe. And they set about punishing those who have offended the clan in really big ways. So, and that's not just within Clan Ventrue. That's also outside of Clan Ventrue too. So if there's someone who has really offended the clan as a whole, the Efferate, the Directorate, is the group that kind of oversees and handles that level of insult. And a good way to think of them is to think of them almost like the inner circle for Clan Ventrue. You know, the inner circle of the Camarilla, which is that highest level of power and administration in the Camarilla. That is what the Efferate is for Clan Ventrue. They, yeah, like I said, they oversee the more global network of the clan.
Well, and of course, they need some helpful right hands. So I'm gonna attempt this. The Strategoi. Also known as the Elders.
Yes.
Yeah. Think of these guys as kind of the Justicars to the Directorate.
Yes.
Yes. They definitely are the ones that work the will and make sure that what they say gets done. So you definitely, if you hear that word thrown around, kind of be nice to them. You know, if you know who it is, because I would love to see that in a game. Some elders come into town and you're just kind of mouthing off, and it's like, oh boy, what did you just step in?
Ooh, that wasn't good.
Ooh.
Now, here's the thing with the Strategoi is that they never take a Camarilla office. So they will never be a prince. They will never be a Justicar. They will never be an Archon. They work strictly within Clan Ventrue. But they have that same level of dignitas as, say, a Justicar within Clan Ventrue itself. Not outside of Clan Ventrue, but within Clan Ventrue. So if an elder, if a Strategoi shows up, and they may or may not announce who and what they are, and you go mouthing off to them, that's a bad day for you.
I love that idea of no conflicting loyalties, because I'm sure all Ventrue are loyal to the Camarilla, but if they have an office to a particular city, which we'll get to because they do have city-specific levels, then they can't do their job.
Yeah. And honestly, for the Ventrue, as much as they see themselves as the leaders of the Camarilla, it's pretty much going to be Ventrue first.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, all those conspiracy theories of like a shadow government within the clan might not be conspiracy theories.
Well, I hate to tell you this. I think most clans are going to be clan first, Camarilla, maybe a distant second.
Oh, that's true. That's true. We've already discussed that with, yeah.
So, after the Strategoi, there are the Lictors. And Lictors are sort of the field operatives for the Strategoi, and they're kind of like the Archons are to the Justicars. So they're doing the night-to-night operations for the Elders. Elders seldom go and get their hands dirty because that's why they're Strategoi. They don't have to get their hands dirty. They have lictors to go and do that stuff for them. So lictors are the ones who are going out. They're the ones that if you're in a city and you're coming into Clan Ventrue leadership, the lictor is going to be the person you're probably going to run into the most. And they're going to be the ones carrying the messages or overseeing the plans or maybe doling out the punishments. They're doing the night to night operations, and they're more or less like the clan's police force. They're dealing out the directives from on high and then giving those out to the people on the front lines.
And then next we have the tribunes. These are the eyes and ears of the Strategoi. Strategoi, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, right. And the thing is, like these are the ones that, the lictors may do the whipping, but the tribunes are the ones that do the tattling.
Yeah, they're the eyes and ears.
They keep their ear to the ground and they keep their eyes open. And, ultimately they serve was it Efferate?
Efferate, yeah.
But they answer and relay everything through the Strategoi. They're their main point of contact. Chances are, right, Jen, that the Tribune, does it go in that order? Like Tribune says, "Hey, Lictor, I've got something to report," and he's like, "Okay, I'll set an appointment with the Strategoi."
Yeah.
And then so on up.
Yeah, the Tribune is kind of the person who, more or less, kind of a servitor to the Lictor. So, as an Archon has a servitor in a town who kind of does things for the Archon and keeps an eye on things and reports back to the Archon if things are going on. That's what a Tribune is in any city to a Lictor. tribunes are keeping an eye on the rest of the clan. They're keeping their eyes and ears out. They are reporting back to the lictors and to the strategoi of, what's been going on and what's been happening. And, you want to make sure they're giving good reports about you to the clan and what's been going on in the city. So chances are high that a lictor won't necessarily always be in your city, because the lictors are often off traveling and doing things for the clan. You don't know if there's a tribune in your city or not. Maybe they announce themselves, maybe they don't. But the tribune is always going to be answering to the lictor and the higher members of the clan.
Now, can a tribune take an office in a city?
Tribunes can take office. It's only the highest upper levels that are going to be usually not taking an office. A tribune can. I highly doubt a tribune would be a prince in a city, because then we're starting to talk about some conflicting interests. But, maybe you're a primogen, maybe you're a harpy, maybe you are some other lesser court official, and you're also that, which puts you in some prime position, actually, if you're wanting to feed back up to the lictor. Because if you're, say, the harpy of the city, and you're getting all the information about the entire domain filtering through to you, then that makes reporting back to your lictor of some of the happenings going on very, very easy.
Right. And I would think that if you're going to have a tribune in the city, it would behoove them to probably have them in like the major cities, like all the port towns, heavily trafficked air traffic towns. That way you can, like, again, eyes and ears, you can have all that information flowing through, so you don't skip a beat.
Yeah, and you have to assume that in most major metropolitan areas in the world, anywhere there is a nexus of power, political power, social power, and financial power, there is probably going to be at least a tribune, if not a lictor, there.
And speaking of cities, now we're going to talk about the city level Ventrue office structures, if you will.
Yes. So classically, in any particular domain, the Ventrue have been organized around the Gerousia, or the board. The board is the term that you will hear most commonly because it's more modern, and for most of you players, it's easier for you to remember. Only the oldest and most tight ass of elders is going to use Gerousia. Okay. But basically the board is made up largely of the Ventrue who are in charge of running all the clan matters in the city. And they control all the clan influence. They direct where that influence is going to go. They kind of drive the entire direction of the clan in the city. This is basically how any Ventrue in any city or any large area would organize themselves. If you're a Ventrue in an area that doesn't have a board there, well, you better go find it, because this is the basics of how the Ventrue just run on a basic domain level.
And seeing as how, if you are in a city and there is a board present, that membership is by invitation only, be sure to, as a player, I'm sure you do this anyway as a Ventrue, but find a niche with your influence and kind of be the guy or girl or kindred with that influence. And then chances are you get enough dignitas, you might be getting a little letter hand delivered by somebody's ghoul.
So yeah, like you said, John, being a member of the board is by invitation only. So only the board can invite you to sit on the board. The board can call meetings of just themselves, or they can call meetings of the entire clan, but they're the major adjudicating body. In terms of clan conflicts, they're also the main body in terms of deciding issues of larger clan business within any city. So, and while it's an honor to serve on the board, and it boosts your dignitas to serve on the board, the council actually has little formal power to directly back up any of their orders, outside of the fact that they have more dignitas, and some of them could be elders, your elders. Not as in strategoi, but your elders. And they could pretty much ruin your life if they wanted to. But
Yeah, it definitely behooves you to stay in the board's good graces because they have so much sway over the influences of a city. They also have a measure of protection that they can afford. It's not just the members, right? It's all Ventrue.
Yeah, I mean, they have a certain amount of protection, but they also are protecting the other Ventrue under them. If you don't have their protection as a Ventrue, if you decide as a Ventrue, I'm just going to go and do it on my own without the board's consent, they can't really stop you. Okay. The classic example of this is actually, found among the anarchs, and that's Louis Fortier. Oh, Louis. Louis is a favorite because living in LA, we know Louis well living in Los Angeles. But Louis is an anarch Ventrue. He has chosen to go on his own. So he's not being protected by the board. So everything he does is completely up to him. And there are no other larger or more powerful Ventrue guiding what he does that we know of. So you can, in theory, as a Ventrue, do it on your own without the board guiding and directing you. But if you do it on your own, that means you don't have the board protecting you. And so if your influences get assaulted or seized, if someone comes in and starts, taking your influence network away from you, you don't have that protection of the board to help you out.
So definitely want to stay in their good graces. Definitely play ball because it'll help you in the long run, especially if you're doing an influence game within a city. You just, treat them kind of like, the CEOs of the clan in the city. It's like, oh, hey, I've got a business venture I want to do. Oh, let me get a meeting. Next, we have something called the Praetor. Did I say that right?
The Praetors.
Just Praetor or manager. Again, I like that one. Board, manager. Now, these guys they're the ones that are in charge of running the city affairs, not so much at the level of the board, but these are the kind of guys that can be the prince, seneschal, what have you. They're the ones that are high ranking in the power of the clan within that city.
Yeah, so if you have a Ventrue prince of the city, chances are they're a Praetor. Within the clan structure of Clan Ventrue. So yes, they are a prince of the Camarilla on one hand, but within Clan Ventrue, they're also the Praetor. They're the manager. They're the one who's guiding and directing. They're basically like the chair of the board. I think that's a great terminology to use. They say manager, but manager kind of connotes someone who's mid-level, just kind of doing stuff that other people are directing them to. Right. And I think, honestly, the better equivalent is the chair of the board within the city. They're the person who's really pushing the direction of the clan and the major themes of what the clan is going to be doing in any particular domain. So the Praetor must always be an elder, and they must have an unimpeachable dignitas. Like, you have to have, like, lily white dignitas and more than anyone else. And you have to have a great deal of support from your other peers in the clan, because that dignitas is what not only puts you in charge, but it's how you get things done. It's why they listen to you.
And then these guys, they don't have any power beyond what they already have themselves, but they tend to use their own influences. Yeah, Jen, the CEO thing, that's definitely perfect because they use their own funds, their own influence to get meeting spaces for the board. They're the ones that make sure that the rich and famous are kind of around them. They're also their responsibilities in guiding and managing the affairs of the clan in the city definitely go hand in hand with Prince and CEO.
Yeah, you're the person you are showing off the wealth and influence of the clan, and you're doing it in a particular way, in a particular direction. So, the chair of the board, that's why I said I think that's a much better relative term to kind of help you understand what a Praetor's whole role is. Praetors don't have any formal power or responsibilities outside of just guiding the clan and managing the night-to-night affairs of the clan, and basically being the biggest head honcho at the table. They're the person sitting at the head of the board. But they do serve as the chair of the board when it's meeting. So when you're having a formal meeting and you're having votes, They're the person in charge. They're the chair. They're the one who's running the meeting and kind of setting the agenda for how this is going. And if there's a tie in terms of a vote, they're the tiebreaker. So they're large and in charge. That is what the praetor is. And they can hold this position indefinitely. Only the efforts and the strategoi can remove them. So, just as a justicar or an archon can remove a prince from a domain, only the effort or the strategoi can remove the praetors from the head of the board. So if your praetor who's doing great, then you're in for as long as you want to be. But if you're a praetor who's kind of falling on your face, then they may just remove you. And not necessarily in a good way. They're not going to be giving you no golden parachute.
Now I have a question about that. How, say that you in particular as the chairman of the board, you're not doing so great, but the clan and the city is doing very well. How would like an efferent or a strategoi hear about it? Like, does this go back to like the tribunes? Would somebody on the board, snitch to a tribune, which shoots it up the ladder, and then they come and investigate?
Yeah, it's you go snitch to a tribune and you try to let the efferent know, and then hope that your dignitas and your word is great enough for them to listen to, because that's the danger. So if you are, let's just say you have a praetor who, the clan's doing well, but it's all because of your work and not the praetor, but the praetor's taking all the credit, then you can go to a tribune and say, hey, this is completely bunk. I've been doing all this work, not the praetor over there. Why is he getting all the credit when it's really me? You can do that, and you can let the tribune know and hope that when it gets up to the efferent that they side with you, or they could just see you as being a mouthy, loudmouth upstart and smack you down for it. It's kind of a catch-22. So if you're going to go that route and you're going to snitch on a praetor to try and get them removed, you better have an ironclad plan, whether that is, buying off some people or paying off some stuff with some influences, or promising to like enslave yourself to a member of the efferent. Whatever you got to do, you better have an ironclad case before you start whipping that out, because if it backfires big.
Oh yeah. Remember, the dignitas is the thing.
Yes. So the praetors within a domain, a praetor is going to have a lieutenant or a series of lieutenants, and these are called aediles. So an aedile is basically the messenger for the Gerusia, the board, and the praetor, and they give out the instructions to the other members of Clan Ventrue about what it is that the board wants them to do. And what's the new direction? What's the direction the board is going in? You can think of them almost like, if you're thinking in a company structure, you'll have a board of directors, and underneath the board, you'll usually have like vice presidents or executive directors. That's what an aedile is. They're the person who gets the instructions from the board and has to go out, share it with everybody, and work together to get it executed. So an aedile, basically, they're there to keep an eye on what the lowest ranking members of the clan are up to. They handle the night-to-night business of the clan, and they're helping to direct the influence of the clan's interests. They're in the nitty-gritty. They're in the down and dirty of doing the night-to-night stuff for the clan in any domain. And they are always given directives from the praetor and the board.
And just like a praetor is typically always an elder, don't worry, Clan Ventrue, they don't keep the generation out of it. The aediles, they're typically ancillae, so it's kind of like just the next rung down. Little middle management to give them something to do. No, I'm kidding. They're more important than that. But it is. It's like they're the ancilla, so it's kind of like they're the up and coming. They're hungry for it. They want to please the boss.
Yeah, they're the middle management. I think that's the best term. If you can say the praetor is the chair of the board and the board is the board, then an aedile is that middle management level of a company who's there to ensure that what the board wants happens, but they're the ones who are actually where the board thinks conceptually, the Aedile has to actually figure out a way of executing it.
Oh, well, that's good. A little more responsibility.
Yeah. And that's why they're usually always Ancilla, because by that point, a vampire is old enough and has shown that they have enough common sense, but also have built up enough of a network themselves that they can actually get this stuff done. A neonate, it would be tough for a neonate to be able to perform on this level. You'd have to be a particularly skilled and influential neonate to be able to be an Aedile.
And because of that responsibility, Aediles are nominated either by the Praetor or the board, and there's no limit to how many there can be, although there's rarely more than 3 in any city.
Yeah, because if you get too many of them, then,
Oh, yeah. Too many cooks.
There's too many cooks, there's not enough work to do, and then they're all backstabbing each other to try and, outdo the other, and it's better to just have a few trusted ones who can do the work well.
That's right. Too many cooks. Do. Sorry. I digress.
So then, beyond the Aediles, you have the Quaestors. They're also known as the Foremen, and these are young Ventrue who are up and coming. So these can be neonates, but usually they're older neonates or younger Ancilla, and they're Ventrue who are hungry. They're hungry and they want to prove themselves. And so they have drive and will to do what it takes to grow the clan and succeed. If you're a young Ventrue and you are wanting to prove yourself in the clan, you might receive a promotion into the Quaestors, and you might start getting some sort of more significant projects to do. So maybe, in thinking corporate terms, maybe a project manager or a project coordinator. You're given a big account, and it's your first big account, and it's only the one, but you get to prove yourself with this big account.
It's an opportunity for those young and hungry Ventrue that want to climb the corporate ladder of the inner workings of their clan to definitely prove themselves when given the responsibility. But also keep in mind that within the clan, this is kind of like what's the next up from entry level position? It's kind of like the assistant. You're the executive assistant, and
you're me.
You're you.
Me. I'm an executive assistant.
Jen, are you a Quaestor?
I am. I didn't want to tell you guys, but yeah, totally am.
I knew it. That's okay. Your secret's safe with us. Don't tell anybody.
Okay.
But you definitely have you have no real power yourself, but except for the position, because people know that you'll have the ear of an elder or two, but it's also, if you're not careful, it's also a target on your back because you are young enough to still be messed with.
Yeah. So the great thing about this position is that while it has no real authority over the rank and file, you actually are in a pretty sweet position with some of the more powerful members of the clan in a domain. So you have their ear, and maybe you can drop something into the ear of the person you're working for and say, "Oh, hey, by the way, I heard that maybe investing in this company might be a good thing. I know somebody who knows a few things about it, and I think this is a good choice, boss." That is the level of what a Quaestor is. You have the potential of going up and rising within the clan, but you don't really have a lot of power yet. You don't, but you may be able to maybe drop a little influence here or a little influence there. I've never done this in my work with my executive.
No, of course not.
Never, ever.
Never, ever.
Never. But yeah, that's the level of what the Quaestor is.
And then finally, last but, maybe least in some cases, how do you pronounce this, Jen?
The Iron.
Iron. Yes.
Everybody else.
Everybody else. Rank and file. Nothing special.
You're the plebs.
Yeah.
You're the plebeians. You are there's nothing particularly special about you in Clan Ventrue outside the fact that you're Ventrue, which automatically makes you special. You don't get any special status or dignitas. Often you are the younger members of the clan who you've not proven yourself, So you're expected to basically do what is the most basic level stuff for any Ventrue. All Ventrue are expected to do certain things, and all they expect out of you is to live up to these expectations. You're expected to, of course, expend your noblesse oblige, which all Ventrue are expected to do. And you're expected to comply with the quaestor when they ask, or if another high-ranking Ventrue asks you to do something, or if they give you an order, you're expected to jump right up and do it. But here's the thing. No one has the power to force you into doing anything. But if you have a desire to maybe raise in the ranks of Clan Ventrue, or if you want them not to make your life miserable, then it's probably better to do what they ask. Even though that they don't really have a lot of power to force you into it, it's just better to go along with it, right? So you can be a Ventrue who does not have any rank or title in the clan. There is nothing wrong with that. You can be a Ventrue who's like, I'm sitting here, I've got my little political influence or my financial influence, and I'm busy growing it over here, and I'm happy just doing this, and I never want to be a quaestor, and I never want to sit on the board, and I never want to go hang out with the effort. That's fine. You can be one of those Ventrue. But just know that they still exist out there. So you still have to account to them on some level. So even if you're like, I don't care about growing my dignitas, some other Ventrue does very much. And they're going to probably want you to do something for them or help them out or, whatever. And it's in your best interest to probably do it.
I mean, who doesn't want to help help their buddy? Well, as you guys might have guessed, that with all this clan culture of the noblesse oblige and the dignitas and the ancient Greco-Roman cursus Honorium,
cursus
honorium, and of course with the millennia of just the way that the gears have been working in this machine, the idea that the Ventrue, they're kind of unique in their idea of their right to rule, because they look around, they're like, well, nobody else is really stepping up and doing this to the level we have the structure, we've built this up.
Yeah, they believe they're the rightful leaders of kindred society. They are the shining example of what it means to be noble leaders.
And that belief is so strong that it really ties back into what Jen just finished saying about, the rank and file. It behooves you, and you are expected to help, because they don't want any open conflict. You are encouraged to not openly work against another clan member and to support each other in all things that the clan wants to do.
Yeah, I mean, well, pretty much most clans have some level of association with each other. Most clans have an agreement that, hey, clan first, everybody else second, right? So they tend not to work against each other. For the Ventrue, this is perhaps the strictest, I would say. The Tremere may be even more strict. It's a little trick. It's a little different in Tremere, but the Ventrue are probably one of the most strict clans about this. And because they're hyper-focused on this concept of dignitas and status, it makes them very ambitious. As a clan, they just can be very ambitious. But when you have that many ambitious people in a room together, then that can lead to chaos and anarchy really quick. So it's best to have this rule. Else you would be busy tearing each other apart and everyone out for themselves, and then nothing gets done.
Yeah, to keep going with this, like all the business metaphors, they have a quote-unquote non-competitive clause when you are released into the clan and the domain and the Camarilla at large, you're sort of understood that, yeah, you already signed this in blood, so good luck.
Yeah, it's, you agree to help each other out in all things, no matter how annoying or inconvenient it is. No matter how much you don't like that guy, at least openly, you look like you're supporting him. Now, what you're doing behind his back, that may be different. But in public face, it's the idea of, I'm supporting my clanmate.
With your public face, it goes back to the idea that the Ventrue are so, they place such a high premium on gentility and etiquette that even more so in some cases than the Toreador. because as we discussed back in the Toreador episode, the sky's the limit with how many different kinds of those guys you get. Their sense of decorum is just so present because they have to, as a whole clan, they have to present that front of good breeding. Yes, we know what we're talking about. We are educated as a group, and you can trust us.
It's that idea of your dignitas isn't just a ephemeral concept. It shows in your very bearing and how you approach your relations with other people and your conversation and in your dress. I mean, it's a big deal. So yeah, Ventrue have a tendency for following complex rules of etiquette. It depends on your rank and your status and your age. In Europe, these rules are even more pronounced because in Europe, it was a much bigger deal. So in some of the bigger courts, the major courts in Europe, such as London or Berlin, they have very complex rules of etiquette and who do you talk to and how do you approach them and what do you say when you approach them and on and on and on and on. In North America, they have a tendency to kind of slim those rules down a little bit. It can still be kind of formal, but it's a little bit more relaxed as well. And in some ways, it kind of reflects the difference between the European monarchy and the American democracy. It's that idea that in Europe, you have to like bow certain ways and use certain protocol, and you have to like talk to this person and this person and this person before you even get to the prince. And when you approach the prince, you can't look at the prince and you have to, bow a certain way. In America, most princes will never be doing that. So for the Ventrue, they've relaxed it a little bit here in North America, but still it's the idea of etiquette. You never step out of line as a Ventrue. In fact, you probably know the etiquette as good or better than most of the Toreador, because for the Toreador, it can be artistic to throw etiquette out the window. But the Ventrue would never do that, ever.
Oh, those Tories. Right. No, especially, as you said, in an American culture, formalities may be a little more lax, but one thing that is definitely, I would say, probably paramount among American politicking is politeness. It's the idea that it's not just being nice, it's also keeping in mind this idea of verbal compromise. It's the idea that I'm talking to you and I know you want something and I want something. So we're going to keep the level of conversation civil and we're going to discuss this and we're going to try to work this out because I don't want your feathers getting ruffled. You don't want my feathers getting ruffled, buddy. So, there have been many a quarrel that has been just smoothed over by just simple politeness. Because also, if you're genuine with it, which if you're good at it, you are, it definitely goes a long way. Like saying you're talking to that angry Bruja and somebody says something, they take him off and you come up and you're like, hey, but we've got to work together. That simple, it sounds simple, but it's really not. Being polite is another thing that the Ventrue have mastered as a way of moving through society.
And I feel I need to quote Sondheim, or at least paraphrase Sondheim a little bit here. Being polite is not the same thing as being nice. It is being polite and showing a level of grace and dignity. Whereas a uncouth person who is not up to the standards of the Ventrue may be rude or cut people off or losing their temper. You always are polite and you know how to gauge the situation and be diplomatic. It shows it's very much a way of showing your dignitas and your worth above the rabble, that you have self-control.
Yeah, and continuing with that, it's also the idea that even, we discussed it earlier too, about moving up within the ranks of the clan. The idea that, again, this word dignitas, really, we're not just driving it home or hammering it into the ground. It is key to being Ventrue. It's the idea of the part of that politeness and that diplomacy is keeping your head, keeping tempers cool, keeping your head, definitely understanding the rules of the etiquette. When you're at an Elysium or a salon, understand what is formal, what is informal, and going from there on how to, just how to act like a Ventrue.
A good word to throw in here, and this is from the world of politics, and that's protocol. Protocol is basically a series of different rules of etiquette and ways of acting in a situation when, especially when you have two people of the same power, or if you have a person of a particular level of power and a person of a lower level of power. But it's the way that people of who have their own dignitas, shall we say, can interact with each other in particularly formal ways, and still maintaining their dignitas and their relationships. And so the Ventrue have this down to a science. It's in the way you act, and the way you dress, and how you speak, and the way you address each other. And so, the Ventrue will tend to always act in ways that are engaged in this protocol. And if they don't, then there's a reason for that. And then you have to ask yourself, why are they being nice to me? An elder will usually know all the secret code protocol. Neonate, not so much. Neonates would be really hard pressed to know all the rules, because so much of it is learned and so much of it is experiential. But that's why a neonate will have an elder as a patron, because the elders know it. And so the elders will be like, come here, my child. Come here, you little neonate. You're a complete idiot, and we can't trust you out in court yet. But come here, and we'll train you, and we'll teach you how to play the game.
Yes, the Ventrue are definitely, because it all goes back to that honor, keep saving face of the clan, the image that they project. Your patron, be it your sire or somebody that's taken an interest in you, the Ventrue are keen on teaching, and they will show you there are tons of rules, spoken and unspoken, between Ventrue on how you act, dress, speak. Everything that you wear to a board meeting, when you're addressing a visiting Ventrue to your domain. These are things that you will learn.
The Ventrue, if you haven't been able to figure out, are very big on history. And I respect that as a historian. I, too, am very big on history. Super big. But in particular, they're obsessive about their clan history. The rest of your clan histories, might be interesting. Really, they care mostly about Clan Ventrue clan history and the lore and the bloodlines and everything that goes in it. But even more than their history, they're also super particular about bloodlines that make up the clan. And who are you descended from? So, I mean, Ventrue, we've established they're patricians, they're nobles. And like nobles anywhere, they care about who's your family, who are your people. Where did you come from? Who was your ancestor way back in ye old days? Where was your sire's bloodline descended from? And who you come from in terms of who your sire is and who their sire is and who their sire is, it means something to the Ventrue, and it means something for you and your status in the clan. Especially because, as the Ventrue figured out, certain traits can manifest in certain bloodlines descending through the clan, depending on who your Methuselah ancestor, your third or fourth generation ancestor was. So, for example, if your fourth generation ancestor was Mithras of London, and you and your entire line is descended from Mithras, then you tend to be very observant of the commands of the elders, and you have great courage under fire, right? And that's just particularity of Mithras's bloodline. But if you're a descendant of Alexander of Paris, who's another fourth generation Ventrue, then they're said to conduct themselves with extreme poise and grace, and have a particular skill in oration and public speaking. So that's a particular mark of the descendants of Alexander of Paris. And the Ventrue pay attention to these things because it shows, basically, it's the blood will out. The blood shows in who you are. And are you a good example of your bloodline? Are you worthy of those who have come before, type of thing?
Now, this is something I found very interesting, because this right here is sort of about as mystical as the Ventrue get, because it's the idea of, legend versus fact, I guess. the idea of Mithras, being great courage under fire. Is that true? Is it actually, brought down through the blood? Or is it simply breeding, if you will? Do they look for these traits in the people that they're going to bring across and embrace, and they just cultivate it after the fact?
It's that nature versus nurture argument.
Right.
Is it in the nature of the blood, or like you said, do they look for people who have that quality in that particular bloodline? Like people who are the bloodline of Mithras tend to go look for people who fit these qualities, and people who are of the bloodline of Alexander or Paris, they tend to look for people who fit these qualities. I don't know. It could be like even odds. It could be a little bit of both.
Right. Well, and, there's an argument to be said for all the gentry, because, the noblesse oblige goes a long way with dealing with how they comport themselves in public, because you may have that breeding in you, but it's also how you were taught.
And here, like in everything in Clan Ventrue, that dignitas factors in again, and it factors in a big way, because some bloodlines are said to have more dignitas than others. Again, your behavior is important because it reflects not only on you, but your sire and your patron and your entire bloodline, all the way back to Mithras or Alexander or whoever you're descended from. So entire bloodlines, especially if there's a bloodline that is a branch off a bloodline that has consistent problems, they're like, well, the blood ran true to this point, but after that branch kind of, that was a rotten one. Let's saw that one off. It's a little bit of social Darwinism going on there.
And of course, as we said, nature versus nurture, this is over 2 millennia, the clan has found a way to train all fledglings. And fledglings are, I think we talked about it before after you're embraced, but before you're released of your own recognizance, you've got this period of learning. You got to figure out how the unlife works. And in true to fashion, I'm sure the Tremere do something similar, but the Ventrue, they've developed a whole regime based on, hey, we are going to teach you how to do this, buddy. You are going to be a Ventrue, and that's it.
Yeah, the Ventrue are very strict about their training regimens. They don't just embrace you, give you some blood, say, great, you're a vampire now. Here's the laws of the Camarilla. Best of luck. The Ventrue are pretty much the complete opposite of the Gangrel. The Tremere probably are the only other group who has a training regimen akin to this. But yeah, once you're embraced as a fledgling, you must go through this entire regimen. It's known as an agog or an agoj, depending on how you want to pronounce it. I think my ancient Greek professor's probably over here screaming agage, and I'm like, who cares? It's a training regimen, right?
I'm glad you said it.
Basically, it's a whole training course, trying to ensure that you, the fledgling, don't step foot into a court or in public without having been properly educated about who you are and who your sire is and what your clan is and what they're all about and what the hell is even going on. So I basically like to think of it as Ventrue finishing school. It's that concept of, for the upper classes, they have finishing school where you go and you learn which fork to use on a salad, and which knife you use to butter your roll with. That's essentially what's going on here. It's like you learn how to speak, how to address other people. Who can you address? At what level of status can you address an elder of the course? On and on and on and on.
Right, and this also goes back to the bloodlines, where every sire has a different way of doing it. Their education is dependent on their background and where they come from, and it can take many forms. The constant is that it exists. Every Ventrue does it. Every Ventrue goes through it. And it just depends on what your sire expects of you and what their methods are.
Yeah. And it's not just about teaching you etiquette. It's also about teaching you your place in kindred society and in mortal society. Like, what is your place as a member of Clan Ventrue among the mortals, and what are the expectations being set for you. Yeah, again, John said your education kind of depends on who your sire is and what their background is. Some like to throw information at their children and then quiz them. So sort of the Socratic method. So when you're out in a nightclub and you run into a mortal and they look tempting and you're kind of hungry, what do? You know, kind of quiz them in the classic philosophical style. Others might actually like have a full-on course with like
PowerPoint?
With a PowerPoint presentation, and then your final is to go out there and execute whatever they just taught you on. It depends on the sire, and it depends on the venture of the city, really. No matter how they present it to you, no matter how the information goes, whether they're holding your hand every step of the way and it's a real like mentor-student type of relationship, or it's the Socratic method or whatever, really failure is not an option. It's not an option for a fledgling. At best, you would be insulted for getting your lessons wrong. That's the best case scenario. Someone like really insulting you and making you cry. The worst case scenario is your sire could just kill you.
Right. You don't want that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, a sire might hold back a fledgling who's not progressing fast enough. And if you don't do it quickly or completely, they could just be like, well, I've tried. Enough of that. And then you're dead. So, because Ventrue will not waste their blood and their potential and their influences on someone who's going to fail them. That's just not how they operate. So when you're a sire, you have to at least make sure that your child is not going to make a total mess of themselves out in public, because when they make a mess of themselves, it reflects badly not just on them, it reflects badly on you and your sire and your entire bloodline all the way back to Mithras. So you need to make sure they've got their stuff together.
And absolutely. And once a sire is sure that they're at least not going to screw up in public, then they're given their special Ventrue training and then taken to be presented before the board, because the board, being the most powerful Ventrue of the city, need to essentially sign off on you. They need to make sure that you're not going to embarrass them once you're formally introduced to the prince and the entire court of the Camarilla of that domain.
And sometimes the board will say, oh, hey, they need even more training, or they may want them to have more specialized training. And then you have to go back to the board, and then the board also has to vote. And then when the board votes, then and it's a formal vote. I mean, this is a whole process. It's almost like at a company when you are interviewing somebody for a position, and they have to meet with not just their boss but their boss's boss, and then they have to meet with the boss's boss's boss, and then they have to meet the president, and then they have to interview with the board. That's what is going on here. You take your chill before the board. You have them be interviewed by the board. The board gets to decide, are they ready to move on, or do they still need more training? And then when the board feels they are ready, then they have a vote and say, yes, this child passes muster. Once they've had that vote and say, yes, thumbs up onto the child, and the praetor approves this, then the praetor goes and asks the child a series of questions. Who is your sire? Who is your bloodline? What is your history? What is the history of Clan Ventrue? So basically what the praetor is doing is they want to make sure that your child knows their history, the history of their bloodline, the history of Clan Ventrue, the traditions of the masquerade of the Camarilla, and the laws of the clan. And they need to be able to recite all of those things and recite them perfectly. Because if they don't, the praetor can go, no, not done yet, or nah, we're not going to approve this one. Get rid of them. It's only after the praetor has gone through this test of asking them their history of their bloodline and the laws of the Camarilla and the masquerade and all these things, only when the praetor is happy that the situation looks like this child knows what they're talking about, that only then can they be approved by the clan formally. And then the clan tells the sire, your child is ready to be released. You are no longer responsible you're no longer responsible as the sire over this fledgling. They now can be considered a neonate on their own. And this is where the concept of accounting comes in. Because the law of accounting in the Camarilla is that a sire is responsible for their child. In Clan Ventrue, you as the sire are responsible for your child until the praetor signs off on it. And once the praetor signs off on it, the board has voted, the praetor signs off on it, that child is now no longer a fledgling. You can present your child at court to the prince for them to have acknowledgement as a member of the Camarilla. It's this whole long process.
You got that right. Jeez. This is why I hate office jobs.
I know, right? It's like, it's worse than your 180-day review. I mean, because this could be, a tradition is it's a year and a day. But for some Ventrue, it can be anywhere from a year and a day to 10 years.
Oh my God.
Depends on the Ventrue, the sire, the bloodline. Depends on the court, the praetor. It depends on all these things. So when the child is finally released, they have met the accounting, they are released and can be formally acknowledged as a vampire in their own right, then the Ventrue tend to like to have a party. They like to have a debutante party. It's a coming out party.
Right, or as some neonates colloquially call it, the death day party. Because some sires like to have the party on, like you said, that's why it's like a year and a day, because it's sort of the anniversary of when they were embraced.
Yeah, a lot of Ventrue will do it on the anniversary of when they're embraced.
Right, so it marks the occasion. You know, Ventrues are nothing if they don't have a sense of occasion.
They do. And it's usually a very formal affair. I mean, we're talking swank. They get out the best china for this one, right? They go hire it's usually at a fancy place with all the accoutrements. It's very, very, very elite, very, very swanky. And only the best of the best will be invited to this party. Sometimes it's only Clan Ventrue. A lot of times it's open to other members of the court, but it's always invitation only. Not just anyone can go to a death day party, especially depending on the rank of the sire. Because let's just say this is the prince of the city and it's their child that's being released. Well, then only the most elite people are going to be invited to that. If it's just some average Ventrue, then maybe it might be a little bit smaller of an affair.
In either case, it's definitely a way for the new child to be introduced and possibly even shown off a little bit. You know, and it's also a great way to see how they're going to act in a social function, especially if other clans are invited.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's the debutante ball. It is the way to show off how your child has this decorum and breeding and polish, and it's a way of showing yourself off too. Like, look how good I am at picking children. Like, look how good of a sire I am at training them up. Like, it's a way to show off to the others. Not just your child, but the breeding of your bloodline. And
for new players, just keep in mind, especially if you're playing like that neonate that's recently released, breathe that sigh of relief, because if you made it this far, chances are you've got it. You're going to be a member of the clan. You didn't fail. Step 1 successful. You've gotten the achievement.
Yeah. And if you want to get a hold of us outside of our normal podcast hours, you can find us at Podcast by Night on Facebook. You can also find us on Twitter at By Night Podcast, or you can email us with any questions, thoughts, opinions, anything you want to communicate to us. You can do that at podcastbynight@gmail.com.